Welcome to the Corporate Learning Network videocast. I'm Jeff Cattell. Today I have with me Tom King, Chief Learning Technologist at Boeing. Tom will be speaking at this year's Corporate Learning Week, November 12th through the 15th at Disney's Yacht Club Resort in Orlando, Florida. Tom, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
We're glad to have you this afternoon. I want to start by mentioning you'll be speaking about this. The topic most broadly is called innovation and intrapreneurship. That's a hard word to say for
Yes.
enterprise learning, and that's the session title that you'll be talking about at Corporate Learning Week. So, can you give our viewers a bit of a teaser about what they can expect if they attend?
Well, I'll be addressing some of the challenges that you might see in an enterprise where you often find these things on the web that startups and small organizations are doing these really exciting things, and you may think that it's difficult to do those kinds of things in your organization. So I'll talk about some ways that you're able to capitalize on things like lean startup and customer-driven development and do it in the context of a larger organization like Boeing rather successfully, not only applying sort of startup techniques in an enterprise, but also looking at a way of applying that to learning, education, and training.
Very cool. So it's interesting taking these ideas that, as you're mentioning, may have started out in these smaller types of organizations, like the lean startup idea, and then moving them into a much bigger corporation like Boeing. So what could you say, or how would you say for maybe businesses, big or small, what are some sort of steps that they can take to start innovation in their own workplace, sort of like what you guys have done at Boeing?
Well, we started with a framework that I learned about through the MIT Technology Review. And in that, they talked about what companies that were able to sustain innovation were able to do. And I kind of put a learning twist on that. But what we try to do is we try to think big, kind of brainstorm large, then start small. And then we go into what we call a learning loop, where you're building things basically not so much for the sake of building them as for the sake of the discussion and the learning they drive. So we'll create a prototype in order to learn more about what our learners, what our customers, what our audience needs out of that, and refine the idea till we get to a point where we really have something that's a validated product that will resonate with our customers and meet the learning needs.
Very cool. Very cool. So one thing I wanted to sort of transition into is you're talking about all this innovation. What kinds of learning technology do you guys specifically use at Boeing?
Well, it's interesting. Pilot training at the broadest level, you might think of very similar experience everybody's familiar with is driver's education, where there's some stuff that's sort of behind the book, and you just have to read and understand the facts and figures. And there are other things where you may work with video, and then depending upon your school and sophistication, you may have like a driving simulator or a video game or something you do on the computer, and then you sort of work your way up to maybe being in a parking lot with an instructor, ultimately up to sort of a driving test. And the same thing, and that's one of the challenges for aviation training, is to make sure we really have the right mix of tools and technology to get the learning experience where we're being cost effective and device effective. So you wouldn't want to tie up an entire airplane for the full 30-day training footprint we have. Sometimes it's much smaller than that, but that's one of our larger courses. So you wouldn't want to tie an airplane up for that full thing. But at the same time, there's certain cases where you clearly need the sophistication of a simulator or an airplane in order to get the tactile feel and demonstrate all the sort of knowledge and psychomotor skills you need in order to fly a plane. So to get back to your question about how are we using some technologies for that, we're always looking at what's the most effective device to give the most powerful learning experience at the appropriate cost for the people with the appropriate experience level. So we've looked at things like 3D videos, ebooks, gaming technology, where it's really almost like a casual game about knowing a sequence, all the way up to complex simulations that include scenarios where you're flying a plane from point A to point B and you have to make all the proper entries into the flight computer and set up the controls as you would just for a real flight.
Wow, that's really exciting and really cool integration of a lot of technology is what it sounds like. Getting sort of a little bit more in depth into the technology, one thing that we're always interested in here is looking at these emerging technologies, and you definitely already have touched upon a few of them, talking about gaming types of technology like gamification. There's also, of course, mobile learning, and the other big buzzword recently, maybe not so much in corporate learning, but in higher ed learning, is MOOCs. So looking from your perspective as someone who deals very closely with these technologies. Which new learning technologies do you think really have a staying power?
So I'm interested in things. Much of life is a team sport, and flying an airplane is a team sport. There's a tremendous amount of skill and expertise by dispatchers, the other crew members. So I'm really looking at kind of the social learning and the collaborative learning. And we have a term we use called crew resource management. And it's really about working together effectively as a team. And I think traditionally we have looked at things like CBT or e-learning as self-paced individual activities. And I'm looking forward to sort of bringing the networking and the collaborative aspects of gaming forward into the learning experience so that we could have maybe two students working together in an environment, not necessarily have an instructor there for all of it, but allow them to practice collaborative performances. So I think that's going to have some real staying power, and when we see how sticky things like Facebook and Twitter are with social networking, I think there's tremendous power in sort of a social collaborative learning experience.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So another thing sort of on this technological bend kind of thing, you sort of alluded to this earlier, looking for these new types of learning technology, but something that I know comes up in every business is not just necessarily picking the next biggest, brightest, shiniest technological object. So how do you balance that need to introduce these new technologies at Boeing, but then also not just fall in the trap of using them for just technology's sake?
So an important part of that is really making sure you have measurable outcomes. So when we go through our lean startup-like procedure where we go through a learning loop as we're evaluating things, we look at the performance of the device, we look at the cost to develop the content, and we look at the learning outcomes. And if we don't really see the desired change in the learning outcome, it's a non-starter from the very get-go. However, if we see equivalent learning experience at a cost reduction or a chance to maybe shift the balance as we go to that blend of we have things you may read in an ebook and things you may do in a check ride in a real airplane or a simulator, sometimes it might be that it's a slightly different learning experience, but it allows us to provide a deeper, richer experience or more time on that expensive device, so that might be a worthwhile change. So we're always looking at a combination of the cost-benefit as well as making sure people really have a wonderful learning experience, a lot of retention, a lot of relevancy, and that they can do their job safely.
Yeah, these metrics seem very, very smart as a way of using and measuring the effectiveness of these different technologies. So sort of looking towards the recent past and maybe towards the next few months for you guys, what are the biggest challenges that you face as the chief learning technologist at Boeing, and what steps are you taking to address those challenges?
So I think one challenge is that you can often innovate and conceive of these ideas faster than infrastructure can be built. So for instance, with mobile technologies, not just in aviation, not just in learning, but across the board, you see kind of a transition point from things start off and maybe they're intended as a desktop or a web experience, then they kind of become an acceptable mobile experience, then they become a mobile-friendly experience, and then they become a mobile-optimized experience. And I think one of the challenges is understanding both where you are as an organization and your learners are, to make sure you're not kind of going out for a sort of a full mobile native experience, and then you find out a significant portion of your population doesn't have access to that device. So I think really key to that is staying in step with your customer and understanding when you have to lead or when you're able to drive them to a new experience, and when you have to take a real close look on what they have and work with the infrastructure and the situation and the context they have to learn it.
Great. Wow, that makes a lot of sense. I know I've kept you on the line for a while today. Before I let you go, I want to ask, what are you most excited about at this year's conference?
I think it goes back to the learning context earlier, which is even as instructional designers and training managers and technologists, we benefit from social learning. So I'm really looking forward to the networking and also kind of some informal benchmarking. There may be people in healthcare who are dealing with similar sort of labor and regulatory and highly technical environments that we are, that I might have a lot to learn from, and we might be able to share some tips with them as well.
Great. All right. Thanks, Tom. That was Tom King, Chief Learning Technologist at Boeing. For more information on Tom or any of the other speakers at Corporate Learning Week, you can view an agenda by clicking the Download Now button below. Thanks for watching.